Hi everyone, today we'll be doing one thing and one thing only, which is reading my essay, Straight Dog Water or Saving Alien Earth from a Freudian Snob. However, before we get to doing that, a little bit of information about me and the person that this essay is responding to. First, my name's Persephone Vanderwaard. I have my MA in Gothic English Literature and independent PhD in Gothic Poetics and ludo-Gothic BDSM, focusing partially on Metroidvania, and I am the author of the multi-volume non-profit book series Sex Positivity, its art director, sole invigilator, illustrator, and primary editor, the other co-writer, co-editor being May Ryan. I'm a male-to-female trans woman, Tolkien and Amazon enthusiast, anti-fascist, atheist and Satanist, polypan kinkster, erotic artist, pornographer, and anarcho-communist. You can financially support my blog through Ko-fi or Patreon. One is safe for work and the other not safe for work, but the money for either goes towards the same art and essays I produce, which often complement each other. This essay is written in response to a video by Collective Learning, specifically Alien Earth No Shill Honest Review, this one. Collective Learning, or Rob Ager, they actually have two channels. This channel, Collective Learning, is where the video can be found. Rob Ager is, according to the description of this particular channel, devoted to independent analysis of movies, filmmaking tips, psychology, marketing techniques, media analysis, video games, social issues, reasons to subscribe, original content, not rehashing other people's work, intelligent, well-researched, non-corporate, ad revenue-free, often imitated but never matched, no party politics, plain language, educational, non-conformist, and no clickbait. This channel is primarily known for uniquely in-depth film analysis videos entirely written and edited by the channel owner, not by hired writers. My continued independence ensures I'm still free to explore subject matter that corporate-funded channels shy away from. Before we get started, I also want to say that this video is me effectively reading from a script. This essay is the script, and while I have practiced reading it many times, I will undoubtedly make small mistakes, which I won't have time to correct. However, these mistakes will again be relatively small, such as me tripping over my tongue or something like that, so I don't expect it to really be an issue. We will simply be reading the script essay from top to bottom, and we will be pausing intermittently to look at visual aids, click on links, and stop occasionally to go off script if need be to extrapolate on various points. With all of that being said, let's get started. This essay was originally written, or started to be written, on August 28th, 2025. It is now September 1st, Labor Day. This essay takes Rob Ager to task, his review of Alien Earth being bad enough to merit special attention. I love the show and he doesn't, but the way he doesn't is especially baffling and indicates Ager's drunk the dog water mixed with Kool-Aid, or Freud's jizz. He's a snob and a lazy one at that. Let's give him what for. Note, Straight Dog Water is part of my Sex Positivity book series, which continues after its June 2025 finale in small form content, e.g. essays on and interviews with other sex workers, i.e. I've worked with muses and models beyond those on my acknowledgements page, whose featured models worked with me while I produced Sex Positivity. To see everyone I've drawn before, during, and after said series, refer to my sex work page. Also, this is the safe for work version of this essay, which features censored nudity. The not safe for work version can be found on my website, which features uncensored nudity. And to that, I probably won't be showing some of the visual aids even on this page, just because YouTube tends to be very finicky about that. So if you want to see even the censored nudity found on this page, you need only click on the link in the description. P.S. My live reading of this work in progress, which will contain a final review for Alien Earth when the show concludes, is being released near August 30th, Mary Shelley's birthday. Disclaimer regarding essay contents. All opinions are my own, i.e. as part of my research conducted alongside my book series Gothic Communism. The material within is written, speaks about public figures in popular media for purposes of education, satire, transformation, and critique, hence falls under fair use regarding copyright and free speech regarding defamation. Content warning. Sexism, racism, rape, BDSM, all-around Gothic stuff, trauma, violence, exploitation, and spoilers. Straight Dog Water, or Saving Alien Earth from a Freudian Snob, Rob Ager shows full ass, reviewing show he hasn't fully watched. I've known sheep that could outwit you. I've worn dresses with higher IQs, but you think you're an intellectual, don't you, ape? Apes don't read philosophy. Yes, they do, Otto. They just don't understand it. British white moderates aren't above the grift, it seems. In his latest no-shill honest review, and despite having only seen part of the show, Ager calls Noah Hawley's Earth another suspiciously overrated franchise installment, adding Disney at the end of the title to really add to the clickbait. This is, as the kids say, straight dog water. As a trans academic who also has her own website, and also does all her own work independently, meaning without state pay, and one who views pure psychoanalysis as anti-Marxist garbage, allow me to weigh in, said the millennial goth nerd to the Gen X fossil, the former scolding the latter for worshipping Kubrick, Freud, and Cameron, etc. Alien Earth rules, so far, and you're dead wrong, Rob. Table of Contents. A quick preface. Is Ager a Nazi? I go into my reasons for writing this essay, including spotting and puzzling over Ager's anti-DEI dog whistle.
Scene. We have got the usual Disney DEI stuff, the diversity casting and stuff going on here. That you have to have an equal number of characters of this race and skin color and blah, blah, blah. You've got that usual stuff going on in this show, but I'm not going to go on about that.
Setting the stage, Nerd vs. Nerd, the Poet and the Prude, introduces Ager and I, outlining how we're both nerds, but of two differing types. Lazy Nerd is lazy, discusses Ager's laziness, mainly his having only seen 3 episodes for Alien Earth before rendering a verdict. Playing with Power, R.A. Metroidvania, Amazon's in ludo-Gothic BDSM, discusses playing with power as I've explored it before, i.e. as something to defend Alien Earth with from Ager's terminal prudishness. The Fate of the Gorgon, or Medusa Lives, quickly outlines how workers can revive Medusa for dialectical material purposes, i.e. that serve workers mid-duality. Down to Earth, and brass tacks, applies my past work outlined above to Ager and Alien Earth, which again I rescue from Ager's snobbishness. Some praxial takeaways. Considers how we can take the previous ideas and apply them to real life, ergo rebellion. In conclusion, R.E., Ager's work is dog water, a reprise. Note, there isn't a section dedicated to Mary Shelley and Frankenstein, which we'll discuss throughout vis-a-vis the Alien franchise. Also, while we discuss Ager a fair bit, we do so among other topics too, i.e. I'm also a sex educator who teaches ways to cultivate the habits needed for good praxis, synthesizing different lessons useful to universal liberation, e.g. pornography as activism and art conducive thereof. In other words, to understand my arguments about Ager and how I critique him, you'll have to know where I'm coming from. Fret not, I've signposted everything here, and linked to plenty of additional material in case my examples feel inadequate. P.S. Unlike Ager, I won't review Alien Earth until I've seen all of it. For now, know how it compares to Frankenstein. For example, Shelley frames her story between multiple concentric points of view. Earth emulates this through its expert use of cross-cutting and cross-fading, and present scenes, as well as flashbacks and flash-forwards, some shots containing 3 scenes in one, framed around portraits on screen above. The full review will cover the script, cast, acting, effects, photography, ideas, and sets. A quick preface. Is Ager a Nazi? If you prick a centrist, a fascist bleeds. In turn, centrist is just another name for white moderate, liberal and neoliberal, one pertaining to Western liberalism, the other a freeing of the market tied to endless state and corporate growth. And while each label speaks two different things, and while I originally pegged Ager as some kind of goofy-ass libertarian from Old Blighty, and a Scotsman, not a Scouser, the fact remains intent doesn't matter, outcome does. Very Ager complaining about DEI and alien Earth. This preface explores what I won't have time to stress deeper in, but was the crux for me writing this essay at all. Is Ager a Nazi? Well, is he? I don't mean a flag-waving fash, or even a crypto-fascist, but anything comparable to or in cahoots with a climbing right wing in the UK and elsewhere. For someone whose country of origin already has a bad history with fascism on home soil, Ager was saying some oddly hostile things towards the show with a strong neoliberal critique, the villain being a literal trillionaire, for example. Yet he was also veiling things in his usual I'm a fancy pants film critic in total rebel veneer, one he's used for nearly 2 decades, i.e. despite his over-reliance on Freud, Kubrick, Jung, and other psychoanalysts or directors they glaze, mainly men. Ager's something of a steady knockoff, copying decades-old academia. Moreover, he's a chip off the old block, longing for a particular 1970s and early 80s Gothic devaluing anything in my lifetime. His nostalgia invades his praxis, and his praxis is inert. See Overcoming Praxial Inertia to understand what I mean by this. Here, we find some clues speaking to Ager's non-party politics, e.g., John Carpenter's Escape from New York, with Ager writing on speaking about anti-capitalist themes in John Carpenter's classic sci-fi action movie, from the video description, The Dystopia Smokescreen, which seems to actually be a clip from an older review Ager did for the movie years prior. The premise is fine, but one where I mistrust Ager for treating the director and lead white, cis, male actor as the center of attention on and off screen, i.e., Ager unable to kill his darlings, less critiquing Carpenter and more worshipping the ground he walks on. I say this as a movie fan who loves Carpenter's early work, but can readily say that his ideology is far from perfect, e.g. Halloween looks and sounds fabulous, but remains incredibly conservative in its messaging and treatment of women. In times of crisis, we simply have to do better, something that will become readily apparent when we get to Ager's current work, i.e. Ager and I are both non-affiliated in our politics, but we're far from identical when applying them. To that, I'm hardly a YouTuber by trade. My work applies to media in real life as readily overlapping whatever I choose to share on YouTube for historical reasons. Yes, I sometimes make react videos, but generally prefer essays centered around radical politics, helping marginalized people, especially unpaid labor, which sex workers classically are, i.e., pimps take most of it. By comparison, Ager actually has 2 channels, both totaling over 350,000 subscribers. It's not crazy high, but also not anything to sneeze at. Furthermore, you'd be hard-pressed to see many videos from Ager that don't talk about film as standalone objects. I say this while noticing his channels being substantially bigger than mine, and in ways that feel more money-driven and status quo. It's not that Ager refuses to get political, but generally feels removed from media as it ties to activism and current events. For him, the movies themselves take center stage, above, his politics and audience oddly veiled and obscure. It's borderline apolitical, which is never a good sign. Read MGTOW vibes. Mopping the dregs up outside academia, Ager at least seems sincere in his practice of passing himself off as an authority on Freud and film, and if that were all he was up to, I wouldn't really care. But something about his recent Alien Earth review bothered me, i.e. an anti-fascist trans woman whose alarm bells were suddenly ringing more than they should have. As someone specializing in a combination of Gothic theory, Ancom Marxism, ludology, BDSM, and gender studies, i.e. the recipe for Gothic communism as a holistic exercise, let's just say I have a nose for bullshit. Ager's reviews stank bad, and me, being a total cum slut who loves Frankenstein but also the Alien franchise that followed it, decided to go in for a closer look. We'll get to Ager's review deeper in. As for Ager himself, I couldn't put my finger on him and his motives. E.g., to a similar degree as me wondering if Tommy Wiseau was actually a secret evil genius or total hack. Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. Originally, that's what I thought with Ager. However, while watching his review for Alien Earth and hearing Ager dog whistle annoyingly about DEI, I lost my temper and said under my breath, "Motherfucker's a goddamn Nazi." Of course, the reality is slightly more complicated. I don't think Ager's a literal Nazi. I think he's a white moderate, i.e., many bigots are moderately bigoted, with men like Ager just as likely to enjoy the perks of state abuse until it jabs them in the ribs and asks them to prove their loyalty. Non-compete, for example, sums up liberalism well. Quote, "It is an unfortunate act that bourgeois liberals do not ultimately seek to build a world free of oppression, for all their pretty words. Rather, they cling to the capitalist political economy, which is built upon class division, that brutalizes and dominates the majority of humanity. Fascism and liberalism are distinct ideologies with distinct political programs and institutions. They are not one and the same. They emerge from different material conditions, and they serve different factions of the ruling class who have conflicting views about how best to rule over the workers of the world. But in terms of function, they are one and the same. Emphasis me. Both exist to serve and defend capital." Unquote. Source, Third Wayism and the Liberal Fascist Bargain. And for all intents and purposes, whatever label we could pin on Ager, white moderate is what I ultimately went with, despite being triggered. I did so partly based on, one, his love for Kubrick and Freud, similar Goldilocks radicals venerated by Hollywood and mainstream academia from the mid-20th century onwards, and two, for the many times Ager's evoked in outmoded academic parlance one passed off as gnosis to the uninitiated. In other words, Ager's something of a charlatan and fraud, which many academics are, to be fair, leading this nerd to go to war against him, as an expert of the same media he's lectured about for years, but also other forms he really hasn't. For example, some of Ager's work on video games, especially his videos on alien isolation, are quite solid, if only because his Freudian approach gels nicely with CA's revival of Scott's 1979 original. That being said, his focus isn't really on video games, i.e. Ager tends to use video game as an insult in his material, leading me to dislike him similar to many academics stuck in movie mode, e.g. Barbara Creed, at least as of 2022, still focusing on movies. Movies good, video games bad. Yeah, sure. And despite my Gothic ludologist credentials, it's not something I'll bring up too often here, i.e. because Alien Earth isn't a video game. Even so, I thought I'd at least mention it. From Radcliffe and Lewis onwards, bitches love playing with the Gothic aesthetic of power and death, too. It's how you play with it that matters, which again we'll get to, re with ludo-Gothic BDSM. Ager's approach, while veiled, betrays him through a lack of anything substantial, meaning in dialectical material terms, re him showing his ass, that he mostly likes old movies, not video games or miniseries, the latter his green eggs and ham. To conclude this preface, Ager's a bit stuffy and broken clock, only lending credence to the white moderate label I eventually settled on. Actual full-blooded Nazi? Bit of a stretch. White moderate who downplays fascism? Abso-fucking-lutely. Borrowing from Malcolm X's 1963 Foxes and Wolves argument, I hate moderates as much as I do knives-out reactionaries, i.e. they go hand in hand when fucking over people like me, minorities. But also, Ager's just a bad academic, period, and I want to show that, too. re in defense of Alien Earth, a series that I completely adore from one of the worst videos I've seen from Ager. In it, he says some incredibly stupid stuff, which also inspired me to work as hard as I did critiquing him. Let's get to it, shall we? Note, I'm critiquing Ager as an academic would, passionately about the same material, but as someone I don't know or encourage violence against. Save it for the Nazis, yeah? Setting the stage, nerd versus nerd, the poet and the prude. To be honest, we're both nerds here, but very different in our approaches. While Rob is something of a prude, I'm a poet and a slut who works at using everything I got. Alas, academia classically discourages sexuality and poetry in its arguments, and restricts those arguments to the very narrow sphere that Ager embodies. It should be noted that while Ager isn't from academia, he acts like he were, i.e. in how he styles himself an intellectual, one who dubiously prays at the altar of Kubrick and Freud, and other equally sexist men, doing so through a narrow, psychoanalytical approach borrowed from late 20th century film criticism, RA of the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. To that, Ager has his own website and YouTube channel, the latter since 2007, and was a filmmaker of the early 2000s into 2012. When Scott's Prometheus came out, his latest project in that department was indie, specifically a low-budget horror film called Turning Your Grave. Exhibit 0. Talking about living in someone's shadow. The main difference between Ridley Scott and Rob Ager is, while both men are filmmakers, Scott worked professionally in commercials before switching to studio films, i.e. in the 1970s, first with 1977's The Duelist, the same year as Star Wars, but with a historically down-to-earth approach, followed by Alien in 1979, where his skill as a storyboard artist convinced the producers to double the film's budget, which they enthusiastically did after seeing Scott's initial 6 months of pre-production, aka Ridley Grams. Ager, on the other hand, was born in Liverpool, 1973, and didn't step onto a film set until his 20s. His interest in film is definitely more on the critical side, i.e. versus indie film direction with a bit more skill, energy, and yes, luck, e.g. the Spears Sisters above, also out of Canada, where Ager currently lives, re my interview series with them after they made Alien or Under capital, filmmaking is always a business, one hindered by manufactured scarcity and competition. The Spears twins and Shakespeareans, made or on money awarded by Fox, having placed high that year in a competition for Alien's 40th anniversary. First and foremost, Ager's a film critic similar to Roger Ebert, i.e. nerd as a status to enjoy, and darling to kill, re me versus Ebert in Whores and Faust, one that likes of which inspired me back in the early 2010s, but it feels increasingly underwhelming after I came out of the closet and wrote my own book series. In regards to me back in the early 2010s, being inspired by Ager, e.g. my 2014 Frankenstein essay Born to Fall, Birth Trauma, The Soul, and Der Maschinenmensch, inspired by Ager's old chestburster scene analysis video. Like Eger's a prude, especially the kind that nerdy sluts like me openly despise, and one whose sorry aversion to poetry and fun, and strange lack of thesis arguments, I will counteract here, i.e., with my own patchwork nerdiness offering the audience a poetic, pornographic, and artistic flair admirable to my academic thesis work. Despite Ager's statement about plain language curiously echoing Wordsworth, poetry and academia are no more exclusive mutually than art and porn. Regarding Wordsworth, his preface to Lyrical Ballads, 1800, and endeavored to bring my language near to the real language of men. It's conversational, therefore accessible, but has plenty of academic elements among the porn. Gothic is porn half the time, e.g. Giger and Alien. Lazy nerd is lazy. A huge problem with Ager is he's lazy, coasting by in his perceived success and status, i.e. so confident in himself and his position that he'll review Alien Earth after barely watching half its episodes, e.g. for a failed filmmaker sitting in Scott's shadow. Ager sure talks a lot of shit about the production values on Earth, except those aren't the focus of my critique, which targets his thematic analysis, e.g. Amazon's The Promethean Quest and Power Fantasies, at which Ager's review gets completely wrong by wanting Earth to be aliens, which we'll get to when we examine my past work on Frankenstein onwards. Furthermore, far be it for me to accuse anyone of unapologetic schlubbiness, but Ager's own doesn't earn him carte blanche either. White straight guys hide behind their ordinary appearance, an elevated place within society's patriarchal, ethnocentric hierarchy of values, Ager having flown under my radar for years. Source: The New York Film Academy's How to Become a Film Critic, 2014. Be born white, straight, and male, I guess? How quaint. The problem is, you still can't review something if you haven't seen it, and his review has nothing intellectual to offer. Ager's issue is, first and foremost, that he reviews Alien Earth after having seen only 3 episodes, the 4th of which proves many of his arguments wrong, e.g. that the show treats its children as consciousness transferred versus copies of the original simulacra that simulate an out-dead entity. Ager's premature dismissal is profoundly dumb. Only having seen Hawley's maid and butler dialogue on medias res, setting the table as it were. I don't care how nerdy you posture as then, that's sophistry on Ager's part. In doing so, however, he likewise affirms an exceptional confirmation bias, arguing that he's right because other YouTube comments agree with him, i.e., he's right a priori through parasocial engagement and falls on the side of states' rights versus worker rights, too. We'll get to that. It's alien minus the irony. Pertaining to a point about parasocial engagement, which Ager thinks he's right a priori thereof, versus my trans friends and I liking the show outside of YouTube, i.e. as a part of the extensive research I do on Amazons while working with dozens upon dozens of models, e.g. Hannah Hussein above, and Barbara Creed's monstrous feminine, therefore the alien universe, their tastes aligning with mine through actual social sexual interaction, which YouTube comments certainly are not. This is cultish behavior on its own, and one that cloaks suspiciously Tory vibes within a no-party politics and faux rebel facade. Ager never defines his terms, calling Earth bad and stupid without citation. Instead, good and intelligent equal anything that upholds the status quo, versus raising class, culture, and race consciousness, as I argue. E.g., he thinks DEI is a problem, a dog whistle to his conservative audience while complaining about racial inclusion, and that Wendy is, in his words, a power fantasy that infantilizes the audience. Fuck you, but also, come again? How dumb do you think we are? And furthermore, did someone pay you to write that? This is pure Darvo on Ager's part, with him pining for the Cartesian peace through strength, might makes right, fascist approach that Cameron enjoyed, strength is good, and anything childlike is weak. It's a very schoolmaster approach, one conveying a nostalgic Heinleinian obsession with Nuke the Red's order from Ager that employs different double standards, strawman arguments. These aren't hard to discredit. For one, the show is the opposite of a power fantasy, because it follows the same Promethean quest that Alien did, and by extension Shelley's novel, which Ager never mentions, undermining the monomyth, ergo its heroic violence in Cartesian binaries, thinking beings versus extended beings. Frankenstein being the original sci-fi story in the modern sense, i.e. the modern Prometheus, born from Gothic yarns and written from a woman's perspective, and a teenage woman at that, versus state power through fixation on creation, seg technology warped by parental hubris leading to offspring revenge. Doesn't everyone want their parents dead? For example, Wendy beheads the Gorgon to bring it, the fire of the gods, back and speak in its voice, i.e. the curse of the creature. Nature, pimped by the state, invades Troy, Trojan horse style, through Weyland-Yutani, arguably outmaneuvering boy cavaliers, Frankensteinian hubris, Faust aching to interview the devil, Nietzsche's "Thus spoke Zarathustra" in The Will to Power, or Hippolyta interrogating Medusa versus shooting first, asking questions later, the settler colonial MO under Pax Americana. Wendy speaks the language of the native population, effectively doing what Ass suggested in the original Alien script. Talk to the creature, virgin, whore, the opposite to what Victor largely does. Instead of automatic violence, there's a diplomatic element, sympathy for the devil, whose petrifying qualities for the Gorgon myth yield anti-predation results, e.g. acid for blood being an anti-rape tool versus tokenized predators above. Cthulhu Fatagan, the clicking insect sounds heard in Earth indicative of various African tribes brutalized by the Western powers. Before we get to Alien Earth, let's consider the same gothically poetic and playful arguments regarding power and Prometheus that Hawley borrows from elsewhere, i.e. from the sort of media that Shelley's novel inspired, including the Alien franchise and its spiritual siblings, i.e. the very sort I've studied for years now. Playing with power, i.e. Metroidvania, Amazons, and ludo-Gothic BDSM. Before I proceed, Ager smugly talks about power fantasies like he's written books on them. It's basically an appeal to authority, i.e. he's a film critic, one made by an ostensible virgin, the nerd who is always alone in his videos, i.e. someone who doesn't play with power fairly so much as pimp it unfairly. Unlike him, though, I actually have written books on this topic, and I'm not allergic to raw sex in my scholarship, REM Metroidvania, Amazons, and ludo-Gothic BDSM, so let's take him to school. A sex worker and academic trans woman, I'm the likeness of the Gorgon who fucks with such things, biznatch. I also know how straight men fear naked, intelligent women who play with power as something to embody and reclaim, i.e., what the state can't control, try as it might, so stare and tremble at Medusa set free, her wisdom of the ancients stabbing at post-scarcity. Behold a pale horror, fight ass with ass. Given my expertise, here's an extended section with several citations about playing with power, namely rape play and the power of creation post-abuse. RE as core themes in my work, i.e. the fire of the gods, a classic plaything that mortals play with, meaning Promethean stories furthering Kristeva's abjection process or reversing it, regarding sex and force, the ancient language of the Imperium bleeding into a Protestant ethic, the Cartesian Revolution, and capitalist realism under present theaters borrowing from the past. She Mighty Mighty refers as much to castle-like bodies as body-like castles, mise en bime. But any exploration equals interrogation, i.e. movement equals dialogue during ludo-Gothic BDSM through Gothic spaces of power abuse, rape, or playing with gendered ideas of derelict power for the taking, whose kinky iconoclastic potential is classically numinous, the Gothic quest for the numinous, re Varma, while embodying such things person and place, re from Volume 1. Quote, Volume 1 invites the reader to consider investigating power and trauma through theory and praxis as things to synthesize and express, i.e. through active, informed, collective participation, e.g. through shared exhibits like the one below. Said exhibit was created between Roxy Rusalka and myself, with Roxy being informed of my project ahead of time and agreeing to take part. It was deliberate, planned, and took time, money, and work to pull off, but also mutual informed consent. Exhibit 6B2, model and artist Roxy Rusalka and Persephone Vanderward. Instruction occurs through the interrogation of trauma, wherein power is perceived and performed, i.e. through ludo-Gothic BDSM, general Gothic poetics, and simplified theories that incorporate a fair amount of former worker history pushing towards liberation. Said history is typically lost under state operations and must be repeatedly reclaimed through a liminal pedagogy, the act of reimagining systemic abuse received by workers from state forces. This reclamation very much includes monsters that are historically regarded as treacherous to status quo agents, but especially regarding men under the Cartesian model, e.g. the nymph or siren as a regular emasculator of traditional stations of male agency and authority. To that, Roxy's handle, Rusalka, refers to a type of Slavic water siren, which Roxy suggested I use as inspiration for depicting her in my book. Seeing as I already recognized the mythology from Thomas Happ's 2014 Metroidvania, I drew Roxy as a Rusalki from Axiom Verge to instruct viewers with. In stories like Alien Earth, which is to say stories like Shelley's novel Ergo Metroidvania, Medusa is a talking head of sorts, i.e. a witness to, victim of trauma, hence thing to be raped and killed, only to be reborn for future survivors' dialogues the terrorist vice character has about rape on the Aegis, e.g. a costume to wear or mask to put on, playing with rape in quotes, during calculated risk, a refusal to be victim, Creed argues, while relegated to spheres of doom mid-abjection, whose ironic play therein can reverse abjection. The Gorgon is a paradox, then, a walking vasovagal death fetish built for pleasure and pain confused, ergo the virgin and the whore having a secret side she can reveal, i.e. like a weapon as needed, one of guilt, shame, and lust, but also sadness, insanity, disorder, and rage. It is what it is, a gift and a curse, for offense and defense mid-cryptonomy. R.E. Hogel's Restless Labyrinth from 1980, Nicholas Abraham and Maria Torok's The Wolfman's Magic Word, a Cryptonomy from 1986. Cryptonomy meaning a double operation showing and hiding. E.g., the Gothic castle is a big-ass shadow that, despite being a space of concealment, shows the presence of obscured trauma. Cryptonomy is one of 4 main Gothic theories I use holistically in Gothic communism, the other 3 being Kristeva's abjection process, us versus them, Bakhtin's Gothic chronotrope, the Black Castle time-space, and Derrida's hauntology, retro-future. There's also Castricano's cryptomesis, or writing with ghosts similar to how Derrida's 1993 Spectres borrowed from Marx, either case denoting an echo of trauma between pieces of language, and Hogel's Ghost of the Counterfeit, the lie of Western sovereignty haunted by victims behind upon said lie's surfaces and thresholds, e.g. the Medusa. These are big and obscure academic ideas my work relies heavily on, in which these samples are only a taste of. For a deeper look into all of them, refer to the 4 main Gothic theories section from paratextual Gothic documents. To it, She's Darkness Visible, Milton's Satan, a rebel that Medusa, when empowered to receive new bodies made Amazonamachia, can enact rebellion as data through a given population, i.e. Gothic communism, whose corruption of capital and vice versa is the data, e.g. Mickey Storm and I, with Pyramid Head above, but really any engagement with horror is palliative numinous, therefore Gorgon to parlay with, punk to post-punk, e.g. Joy Division, above. Made ludo-Gothic BDSM, a giver of forbidden knowledge, fire or otherwise, offering the power to change the world in darkly radical ways. The desert round Ozymandias' colossal wreck below. Nature is horror, holding the keys to life and death between her thighs, and upon her criminal reprobate ass. Under the Protestant ethic married to mad science, her stony bum is the Sphinx Bonaparte stood before, the smaller of the two, by a country mile. Meanwhile, power flows on said aegis in different directions, i.e. the Promethean quest, an esotropically reversing objection, hence the flow of power, the fire of the gods, therefore nature, away from the state, e.g. land back, labor back, sex back, to perform during the horror's cryptomimetic revenge, i.e. between pieces of language haunted by a larger process as much as Ghost of the Counterfeit, R.E. Castricano and Hogel, while the state pimps nature to preserve itself mid cryptomimesis, the horror works at cross purposes, i.e. the oldest profession, therefore exploitation and struggle, gracing a variety of popular, often infamous stories and media types evoking Shelley's modern Prometheus, R.E. from Volume 2. Astenoetics, or what Michael U-Hall calls a celestial, unintelligible presence, Astenoetic Cinema, 2019, reframed by me slightly, it is the colonial gaze of planet Earth in any imaginary scenario, which the Metroidvania commonly portrays as nature versus civilization. The fact remains that men like Wayland rape nature all the time, but only double their efforts when they, as the system they personify, reliably starts to die. False power. In turn, the state and its men of reason will do anything to preserve themselves, weaponizing their own bloodline against nature, the latter having evolved to resist dominion, thus rape, through counterterrorism and asymmetrical warfare. That's what the Promethean quest effectively encapsulates and discourages. Medusa fucking back to reverse the flow of power and information the monomyth normally supplies in outright parental language, but also monomythic media exposed to middle-class children at a young age. Unquote. Source, She Fucks Back, or Reversing the Modern Prometheus through Astenoetics, the Man of Reason and Cartesian Hubris versus the Womb of Nature in Metroidvania. From novels to Metroidvania all embody Mother Nature's revenge. In turn, the horror's revenge against profit embodies a cycle of violence versus the usual dialectical material forces of capital and its forebears, e.g. the cycle of kings and Shadow of Pygmalion's patrilineal descent, but also Cartesian hubris historically materially having the state's revenge against nature, i.e. blaming the whore for gating paradise, ergo cock-blocking Bacon's rapacious desire to penetrate nature's womb, thus achieve everlasting life for the elite mid-capitalist scene, R.E. Patel and Moore, see Away with the Fairies or Double Trouble and Axiom Verge for a good example of this larger process. Shelley clearly disliked and critiqued such men of reason in her novel, i.e. a desire of the rape victim that survives in a variety of media forms, quote, standing in for absentee parents, video games for our purposes, the givers of Cartesian dogma, but also rebellious sentiment through Promethean allegory, the appearance of the Black Castle, fallen man-made paradise to begin with, unquote. Quote, the idea is both older and newer than Forbidden Planet, surviving in various stories that came after it. This brings us to Metroidvania, whereupon games like Metroid and Axiom Verge present the Promethean quest as the fatal discovery that one's actual or de facto parents suck royal ass, and that one's home is ultimately doomed because of it, founded on nature as raped by science. I.e., there's a couple basic ideas about Metroidvania that come from Forbidden Planet, At the Mountains of Madness, and ultimately from Frankenstein, and to a lesser extent, The Tempest. A hero is summoned from earthly spaces by the gods to break the stalemate between nature and civilization. They learn about their infernal godly parentage, raised by wolves, bird people, or mad scientists, etc., i.e. that their Persephone come home, or Alucard, son of Dracula, etc. The land of the gods is destroyed afterwards, e.g. blowing up a planet, sinking an island, or closing a gate that leads to such places, i.e. destroying evidence and witnesses, but also keeping monomythic mementos, souvenirs, while treating the larger event as dreamlike, similar to a Midsummer Night's Dream, something to suggest and dismiss. Science and technology become mythical, even magical, but still comment on our world now in relation to technology and capitalism back then as inherently illusory, manipulative, and unstable. Whatever the form, a Promethean story revolves around the child as coming of age while inheriting the past through such discoveries, hell and the gods, fascism and nature, coming home. Their parents are away, asleep or otherwise, and the child, often grown up like Morbius and Victor, but also Samus below, must explore the hellish home, the Unheimlich, to put the wrong things right. In doing so, the home wakes up, putting the child in danger while teaching them about their doomed past, often through heraldry and statues below. The past then becomes something to inherit and destroy with whatever's on hand, scuttling the castle, the boat, the giant, or some combination of these things, as having the means to self-destruct built in, e.g. the switch in Morbius's lab, or the Nostromo's scuttle mechanisms, etc. Unquote. The Cartesian rubric is always one of rape, thus genocide dressed up as progression, civilization, reason, what have you, whereas revolutionary cryptonomy reverses objection on the aegis and the exhibition voyeurism of strong bodies, the paradox of empowerment through apotropaic exposure. State cryptonomy furthers objection by abusing nature, specifically Hermontius feminine peach buttressed by this or that, often God-given body fat above, i.e. a routine prize cut up by state proponents. Across a state's lifetime, the earth and its territories and peoples, animals and environments are endlessly cannibalized by thinking beings scared of death and sex, yet emboldened by divine right, from Columbus onwards. We stewards of nature escape capital's hellish stalemate, liberated mid-exploitation by using rape play of the special kind Shelley offered, i.e. to free the Gorgon during ludo-Gothic BDSM, re as I envisioned it based on Shelley, but also those she learned from. Quote, as far as I see it, the Gothic isn't solely empty escapism, but tries to imagine things beyond capitalist realism using the numinous language of the imaginary past through bad replication, to evoke powerful sensations that penetrate state deceptions, i.e. a retro-future that envisions possible futures good and bad through the reclaimed language of the past as it once was reimagined, not the future, as Fisher's hauntologies, the cyberpunk, speak to with. Like Milton's Satan, it is defined by its ability to create things that go against preconceived ideas of the West, haunted instead by Western atrocities and failings. The future is gay and hellish, set free to express reality in Gothic maturity. Unquote. The Gothic is writ in decay, re a song written in decay. On the aegis, we whores, de facto or otherwise, use what we got, re when the man comes around, show him your aegis. The state assigns the Gorgon and her offshoots victim status to police nature, but any victim can be a survivor who lives to tell the tale, sometimes if only from beyond the grave, returning home as ghost, zombie, vampire, etc. To that, Medusa is also a pirate who may challenge said status, wearing black as she does below, a bold and intrepid explorer who can take it back, her seizing of the means of production referring to and with her actual body, female or not. This happens through the same endless dialogues we've discussed, which embellish but also marry sex and force, war and Gothic to poetic freedoms of expression, therefore existence, i.e. half-real dialogues raising intelligence and awareness, therefore Cain, versus state actors pimping Amazons in bad faith. What they cage we set loose, and in defense of workers and nature. That's our utility, and what Ager's notions of intelligence and good lack. A real pimp, he is. A means to materially challenge state power and state shift, Ari Patel and more, through social codes played out. We and our secret weapons hide in plain sight. Power in the flesh, something to behold. Monkey see, monkey do. Come to mommy, little one. She has needs like you wouldn't believe. The Amazon a conqueror of doctor archetype from Athens onwards that plays into rack, consent, non-consent, and age play kink, among other taboos the Gothic explores easily enough. Let's touch on that briefly, the fate of the Gorgon, then jump into Alien Earth proper. Note, the above examples were merely sample sizes from a much larger body of work. For a comprehensive look at Metroidvania, refer to the entire chapter She Fucks Back, but also my 2025 Metroidvania corpus, and extensive work on Amazons, e.g. Medusa vs. Amazons and Always a Victim, or Amazons and Anal Sex and Our Sweet Revenge, both 2025, as well as my chapter on Shelley and her novel, Making Demons. Such things are dualistic, cops and robbers, so fuck back, take land back, labor, and sex in dialectical. ways, in dialectical material ways, i.e. that make Amazonian cryptonymy a rebellion whose subversive variety challenges subjugated cop-like forms. Aesthetics form don't determine function, flow of power does. Cops, billionaire states, ACAB, ABAB, ASAB. The fate of the Gorgon, or Medusa, lives. The Gorgon is classically a thing to revive mid-poetics. These poetics serve the revenge of the pimp or the whore, i.e. workers versus the state, man versus nature, etc., while difficult to fully kill mid-cryptonymy during extermination for profit. Dark queens are also classically fetishized and punished, meaning by state chastity narratives mid-monomyth. So often the warrior maiden or princess, a pale Madonna playing cops and robbers from a tokenized position, rapes their own as terrorist, i.e. repeatedly only for Medusa to curse all parties with her revenge, e.g. the radiance, above. But these are things we rebels can interrogate through the Gorgon in the flesh, i.e. as de facto educators of the infernal lesson Medusa offers up, in small, i.e. bringing hell to earth in a half-real sense, on and off stage, mid-liminal expression, e.g. Kuwu and I, or Nyx and I, like the Gorgon brought back to life, turning the nuclear model upside down, therefore Rome and all its ontologies. So do horrors relegated by state power to unspeakable yet commodified states of existence, piercingly invade the present with retro-future echoes of monstrous feminine, re, from regarding tokenism and fighting it, fucking back for a change, coming home to roost. What they alienize and rape mid-dialectic, we humanize through the language thereof, hugging the alien during a dialectic of the alien that weakens our jailer's hold on nature, thus labor. So often hugging the alien involves various double entendres, a warm wet embrace, the exchange being for data of all kinds, the camp, unironic wandering womb, moral panic, hysteria arguments with silly serious hyphenations of sex and force, forbidden fruit below, wet-ass pussy make that pull-out game weak. Sex is education. Most of canon sees the heroine denying she's a whore. We cummy sluts do it backwards, not retreating from runaway libido, but embracing it on a social sexual spectrum of public nudism, many sex workers being aced to varying degrees. Nerds fuck too, so rub it in any snob's face, not just Ager's. In your face, we rub together what capital keeps apart, each other. Don't be afraid to play with what is forbidden to reduce harm on stage and off, respecting and illustrating mutual consent as you do, of course. Medusa just want hugs, you say? There's a method to the madness. Not only can terror be employed as a weapon, writes Robert Asprey, but any weapon can become a weapon of terror. Terror is a weapon is terror, and no one agency monopolizes it. Unquote. Same idea with violence, re. Weber, and monsters, re. me, see the state, its key tools, re. the monopolies, trifectas, and qualities of capital, from paratextual documents. Gothic communism uses any and all to break capital's monopolies and monomyth on Medusa's aegis. We were the Gorgon the entire time, the very destroyer capital lusts after and run away from. All in all, Medusa lives in us, yet remains an undead, demonic, and animalistic polity of expression, a chorus of horrors fragmented by generational theft and trauma. This includes our playing with power as passed imperfectly dualistically down, i.e. from mother to child, and from child to future creations punching up at profit and patriarchy, on and on and on. She's a voice of rape, presented as monster in ways that must be humanized in monstrous feminine language, i.e. in relations thereof, which brings us back to Alien Earth and Ager's policing of it. So now that I've given you a crash course in power and playing with it, the whore, let's get down to brass tacks. Let's put things to praxis, or through synthesis, one the xenomorph essentially embodies. Down to earth and brass tacks. Learning hurts, the growing pains of childhood into imperiled maturity, a core theme in Alien Earth. That's also what Ager inaccurately and dishonestly calls a power fantasy, or one that infantilizes the audience despite children learning through play using whatever toys are on hand. Are you ready, kids? Aye, aye, Captain. It's an essence to capture, speaking to a variety of factors at play. Lost childhood, and reclaiming it. Needs more thesis, Ager's reactionary antics, what Ager missed, a postcolonial potential. We'll go over the ones above, which I've chosen arbitrarily as food for thought, then move on to some praxial takeaways and wrap up. Lost childhood and reclaiming it. All of this is dualistic, of course, i.e. Peter Pan, both about child sex trafficking and stolen youth, shattered innocence, as well as a childlike rebellious desire following trauma mid-regression, meaning of any character, princess or otherwise, to explore power through nostalgic privateering, which Holly marries the Pygmalion myth and Hippolytus capture forced marriage to Lolita. Pirates are cool. Xenomorph pirates and robots even more so. Gothic historically plays with such pulpy darkness visible, doing so cryptonymically to explore taboo topics in adventuresome media's mere play, a long-lost return to spaces of trauma and play that are forever unresolved, but begging for fresh exploration by dead ringers. The course has been set. There is no turning back. The land of adventure, already a half-real proposition, is one where anything is possible, in which woefully lame nerds like Ager police and turn music and theater in power because they let us spar with colonial forces, i.e. doing so continuously to break capitalist realism, hence reclaim what they stole, the Gothic combo of ancient romance and quotidian novel, a thing to revive Walpole onwards. Ha! Hu! Hi! Ya! Yes, Cervantes' two-part Don Quixote, 1605 and 1615, was classically a tragedy about old men set in their ways, R.E. Ager, but there's room for revolutionaries tilting at windmills, dragons too, to punch up at bourgeois agents, high above. Fighting is the point, and play is a vital means of doing so, i.e. that any revolutionary can take part in and pass down. Simply put, people are full of juice, the stuff of rebellion which walks the line between controlled and uncontrolled opposition, but needs a way to get those juices flowing, the booty to plunder, so to speak, R.E. Scott's space matelotage, but also Amazons at sea from other directors below. In doing so, there's a big difference between total escapism and temporary regression, thus walking the tightrope or the plank between heroic idiocy and adventuresome make-believe. To infantilize someone, as Ager argues, is to turn them into, or treat them like, a dupe. The best stories don't do that. They give room for mistakes to be made and fun to be had, in short, allowing for playing with power to occur, especially where the given past is something fanciful, e.g. pirates, the core of Gothic villainy since Radcliffe, which Metroid projects ontologically into the stars mid-Amazonomachia, with female stars, Gothic heroines, and male co-stars, the ability to act thus take action versus the usual passivity afforded to minorities and women, and classically relegated to spaces of imagination below. Impunity is the apex of privilege, which inclusive play, to steal from the state, overcomes. There's class character and material overcome to the proceedings. Returning to alien Earth and its playing with power and duality of pirates, i.e. corporations versus xenomorphs, it behooves us to remember that children are expected to subsist in paradise as troubled, overshadowed by the tree of knowledge speaking to their own abuse as tied to the rape, pimping of nature, ergo workers made in God's likeness. But while Earth stretches actually talking versus capital punishment, the Amazon warrior dialogue is not incongruous so far as horror goes. Amazonomachia, monster battle, is unto itself a kind of dialogue expressing power as monstrous feminine, i.e. during the abduction process, one that is suitably ancient and derelict into the present world, workers of all kinds rediscovering Medusa's power, resisting discovery colonization to astronoetic extremes. As Creed notes, quote, when Perseus slew the Medusa, he did not, as commonly thought, put an end to her reign or destroy her terrifying powers. Afterwards Athena embossed her shield with the Medusa's head, the writhing snakes with their fanged gaping mouths, and the Medusa's own enormous teeth and lolling tongue were on full view. Athena's aim was simply to strike terror into the hearts of men, as well as reminding them of their symbolic debt to the imaginary castrating mother, and no doubt she knew what she was doing. After all, Athena was the great mother goddess of the ancient world, and according to ancient legend, the daughter of Metis, the goddess of wisdom, also known as the Medusa. Unquote. The Monstrous Feminine, 1993. And when the Gorgon survives to be interrogated by windy, charming snakes, the robot girl befriends the monster who charms her, reversing abjection, having the horror's revenge. The would-be maiden learns from the horror a different side of a bigger struggle, nature versus the state, i.e. the Gorgon might be a size queen, but she's also a grower who starts small only to grow out of control. Big things have small beginnings, and Rome wasn't burned in a day. In any event, forget what Ager says about the show's power fantasy and fanalizing the audience. Wendy is a victim infantilized by capital, i.e. until she reclaims her power from the state by not playing into its hands, as Cameron's sexless Wonder Woman does. The same goes for the other children, the Lost Boys, i.e. abused by the cult-like head of state, as man-made, Boy Cavalier, supplying each a warlike body through the creator's warped view of himself, Ozymandian syndrome inflicting Lolita syndrome, i.e. like Shelley's Victor Frankenstein. All of this goes over Ager's head, of course, with him blaming the show and the children below for the failure of not being intelligent, warlike enough. Keeping with Frankenstein, its Cartesian ethnocentric, prone to view anything beyond the status quo, the state a worker extends from, as degenerate, weak, childish, and stupid, i.e. the master and the slave, under an astronoitic enterprise of endless conquest into space, with Ager attacking Holly for a retro-future dystopia, despite Ager sucking Kubrick's nihilistic dick. Such conquest and its cartographic refrains, routine exploration of old space to conquer anew, are Cartesian, ergo puritanical in their policing, in and out of themselves. It's Pavlovian to a generational extreme, Ager convinced he is correct versus those meddling kids, while he punches the whore to correct her immodest antics, Saturn devouring his son, Perseus killing Medusa, Pygmalion raping Galatea, etc. Kindly or not, the state champion is always rigid, intolerant, and blind, living in denial, re Don Quixote, with Ager both abstaining from Gothic media of a rebellious sort, yet high on his own supply borrowed from a sadly Freudian dogma. Am I out of touch? No, it's the children who are wrong. To it, anything that makes the state look weak, incompetent, or bad is, unto itself, bad, and must be punished, in Ager's eyes. I.e., the company must make intelligent decisions, Ager argues, his astonishing tone deafness and privilege overlooking a bourgeois propensity for cruelty and alienation by capital, which alienates but also sexualizes, fetishizes everything for profit, e.g. Boy Cavalier torturing the machines he makes into children, exploiting the living for their memories, and the mechanical for their labor, which includes the warlike elements projected onto a superiority complex from the master versus the slave, the general commanding child soldiers. Despite Hermit's moxie, that character is likewise critiqued as boyish, silly, and discounted by Ager. He doesn't care about equality, but the proper place where power currently is, by celebrating aliens as 1986 Zulu Dawn rehash into Vietnam Revenge as the end-all be-all, i.e. Cameron's false power fantasy and neoconservative, neoliberal, neo-Gothic power dynamics subjugating the Amazons for decades after. R.A. Cameron's refrain, the shooter pimping Hippolyta into Metroidvania. Ripley roars for the state, utterly cowed in that Radcliffean refrain, the black veil to summon and banish. Whenever the liminal hauntology of war, the traveling castle comes home to Empire, the imperial boomerang seeking the very police states that set it to motion, trigger the rape victim, then hand her a gun and cattle mid-Darvo and obscurantism, the Fash playbook, turf feminism, fascist in practice, a killer of zombies, but also a zombie herself, R.A. Marx's capital is dead labor feeding on living labor. Source, The Limits of the Working Day, 1867. It's not rebellion, but armored subservience to a feminist cop gunning for the Reds, the neoliberal revolt of the elite, played out through their semi-unwilling dupe. The alleged monomythic power fantasy, one that emasculates Ripley in a very pick-me, chaotic way, upholding genocide while acting pure, per the Protestant ethic pimping her out, our warrior Madonna made jobless, homeless, and childish by the very stage she cleans house for, is exactly what Ager wanted with Wendy, and which the show's writers denied him through a proper Promethean quest, and in hauntological retro-future ways he whines about, e.g. deducting points for the dead bourgeoisie, and costumes, as if theater and parties don't exist in the alien universe below, while forgetting Scott's Gothic is hauntological, a flying castle sailing through outer space. Needs more thesis. Ager's reactionary antics. In the absence of an actual thesis, Ager lazily resorts to reactionary critiques, i.e. calling something bad or dumb, code for weak, meaning inferior to Western values. However, his white moderacy betrays itself in other ways too. He also whines about the actress who plays Wendy's body, specifically her neck, and childish mannerisms, also dismissing the show's allusions to alleged pedophile J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan. Never mind that Ager has zero riz, and looks like a pale, chubby Gordon Ramsay, He forgot Wendy as a performance and that her uncanny aspect is deliberate. So is interrogating the immortality fantasy that Ager accuses the show of supporting, re. Wendy. The whole point of Shelley's modern Prometheus, and by extension Hawley's, is a reckoning for the proud, i.e. that their desire to conquer death is a fool's errand. Despite the show's emphasis on critiquing Cartesian sophistry and pseudo-intellectualism, e.g. Cavalier misquoting Arthur C. Clarke the way David misquoted Percy Shelley in Alien Covenant, the biggest fool, it would seem, is Ager pointing fingers at Hawley while calling himself intellectual, dismissing as he does much of the show's thematic content, re. Peter Pan and child disempowerment trafficking by childish men preying on boys or girls. Excluding Cameron's tokenism in Aliens, Ager hates inclusion, ipso facto. He sees Wendy as a failure to be Ripley, versus a completely different character playing with power differently. In doing so, Ager overlooks the impressive cast, the latter team working to tell a collective Promethean story of rebellious creation, versus a singular monomythic one or cheap nostalgia grab, e.g. Romulus below. A film with racist themes, to be sure. Quote, however compelling or enticing the Amazonian drama seems through its emotional sexual appeals, its praxial crux operates on keeping the detective functionally white with a token black male simulacrum's help. I.e., will he betray his childhood of the people friend to help Ash's duplicate achieve immortality for secular colonialism in space? No, he won't. But, by that same token, so to speak, Alvarez has Andy submit to the white girl as knowing better than him, with the two of them bargaining for her to liberate him from corporate bondage, only to be returned to bondage under her care, i.e. is made that way by her father having salvaged Andy from older corporate models built for the frontiers. In short, Andy's a house N-word, and the heroine is literally his owner, who chastises him through force, the ghost of the father literally occupying Andy's mind, programmed to tell dad jokes. Female Gohan with Black Goku, the amazing Robo-Dad, telling her to Kamehameha sell from another hell. Unquote. Ager's dorky moral outrage superiority complex extends to beyond the actors or the plot, though, e.g. hating Noah Hawley's heavy metal selection, i.e. despite Hawley being an accomplished musician and romantic music being the heavy metal of the 1800s before electricity, but also hating camp and gothic like Alien, though apparently Ager thinks it's okay in Rambo 2. In doing so, Ager operates on par with Samuel Taylor Coleridge, i.e. complaining arbitrarily about Matthew Lewis writing The Monk, meaning despite Coleridge's hypocritical Christabel having the old man colonize Gothic, and in ways that Ager does while aping Cameron, who eclipsed Scott's neoliberal critique with an endless false flag punching down, the man, any man, using the Pygmalion fantasy to eclipse the girl who wrote Frankenstein, which she published the year Marx was born, re. 1818. Give me a boy until he is 7, said Aristotle. Behold a man, said Diogenes. Hopelessly regressive, Ager settles for Cameron's immaculate conception, aborting Wendy for disappointing him. Why? My friends and I ask. For we, fags, the show goes in really interesting and delightful directions, creepy, but not a rehash of Cameron's military retro future, itself sucking any liberatory potential out of Star Wars. Instead, Alien Earth discusses cataclysm and alienation in pursuit of found family and friendship among misfits, which we trans people and similar aliens under capitalism historically love. By comparison, Ager complains constantly about being unable to relate to most of the cast, most of whom were women, e.g. Essie Davis returning from Jennifer Kent's excellent Babadook, and or minorities. He merely wanted military violence committed by a white hero against black, non-white victims, and for which the show speaks to a demand for empathy wrapped in childhood nostalgia, by the oppressed of the oppressor when the former reaches their breaking point. Have a heart, or face my fury. Regarding the Babadook, a story I very much adore, and now without its own nods to the Alien franchise, re. Persephone Renderward's close reading Gothic theory in the Babadook. Whatever his target, Ager's an old man yearning for a perfect past that never was, one where children with agency don't exist, i.e. the sort who find power when disempowered by state forces sending them into anti-homes, e.g. haunted houses per Freud's Unheimlich, and Bakhtin's Gothic chronotope, re. Seeing Dead People and Kubrick's Shining Twins, above. Much of the Gothic explores inheritance anxiety under capital's lies. Vulgar displays of power see the powerful playing God in ways that uphold capital, haunted by specters of Marx, which the Medusa very much is. By comparison, Ager does all of this while appealing to the ghost of an audience, re. YouTube comments, and franchise, e.g. his spuriously calling Cameron's Marines well-trained badasses, despite those being, in Cameron's own words, late-stage versions of incompetency from the Americans during Vietnam's Tet Offensive. Hudson was a dumbass, but so was Gorman, Apone, and everyone else following the leader into certain death. Indeed, Cameron's entire revenge fantasy hinges on weakness. Ripley avenging the Marines killed by the alien queen, Ari Hippolyta versus Medusa, the White Queen versus the Black, with Ripley becoming a Dark Valkyrie temporarily to fight fire with fire, a white Indian savior, i.e. Eco's mantra, the enemy is both weak and strong, source Earth Fascism, 1995. Regarding a Dark Valkyrie, what I described after seeing Alien Covenant as the invincible heroine, Ari choosing the slain, one Scott happily dissects, and Holly gives an alien voice. From Shelley onward, such stories historically revolve around ethnocentric ideas of servitude, i.e. predating Ager, that Ager arguably embodies, e.g. Wayland and David in Covenant, the latter character inferior to the former as the sorcerer's apprentice, Formula D, David, with Wayland's Prometheus flying Rome into the stars, and cosmic nihilism being the universe rejecting the rapacious colonizer. He may as well have said, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. What Ager missed, a post-colonial potential. Despite its dated callbacks to empire and operatic stamp, the original Frankenstein undoubtedly has post-colonial potential. The strongman is a fraud outmuscled by his victims. Preparente, ageless, ceaseless fussing, and deafness to allegory amounts to a false rebellion, one where Ager makes a pro-corporate stance, while scapegoating Disney and throwing the director under the bus, and all for giving Shelley's creature a voice once more, muted previously by American gay man James Whale. Given Andor's excellent writing and production values, followed by Earth, I think Ager's anti-Disney stance is a bit too blanket for its own good. Furthermore, Ager's dismissal happens in multiple steps. First saying how Noah Hawley should have been guided by the Coen brothers as executive producers versus Ridley Scott, I guess. Second, that horror doesn't exist alongside child characters in popular media. Ager's protect the child argument ignoring Disney's own marriage of child heroes to horrifying violence. And third, whining that Wendy has plot armor while implying that Ripley doesn't. Bullshit, my guy. Wendy falls prey to one xenomorph. Ripley's literal female Rambo, a turf-style girl boss acting like a man, therefore working tirelessly for the man to kill black people, commies, and sodomites, et al., and en masse. R.A. from Volume 0. Quote, under capitalist realism, hell is a place that always appears on Earth, or an Earth-like double. A black fortress threatening state hegemony during the inevitable decay of a colonial body. Its widening state of exception must then be entered by the hero during the liminal hauntology of war, as a repeatable monomythic excursion, a franchise to subdue during military optimism sold as a childhood exercise towards playing war in fantastical forms, e.g. Castlevania or Metroid, conjure a Radcliffian menace inside the Imperial Corps, then meet it with American force. Threatened, the state always responds with violence before anything else. Male or female, then, the hero becomes the elite's exterminator, destroyer, and retrieval expert, infiltrating a territory of crisis to retrieve the state's property, weapons, princesses, monarchic symbols of power, etc., while simultaneously shadowizing nature in reliably medieval ways, alienating and fetishizing its wild variants, crushing them like vermin to maintain the Cartesian supremacy and heteronormative familial structures. In neoliberal propaganda, canonical heroes are sent, solo or in small groups, deployed as much like a bomb as a person, hired by the powerful. These walking armies destabilize target areas for the mother country to invade and bleed dry. A genocidal process the aggressor sanitizes with cryptonymic labels like freedom and progress. To this, they are authorized, commissioned, or otherwise sanctioned by those with the means of doing so, i.e. a governing body centered around elite supremacy at a socio-material level. After infiltration occurs, the agents work as a detective, cop, or judge, jury, and executioner, either on foreign or domestic soil, the place in question framed as loosened from elite control, thus requiring the hero and their penchant for extreme violence to begin with. This makes them an arbiter of material disputes wherever they are, through police violence, for the state, in its colonial territories, at home and abroad. They always follow orders, shoot first, ask questions later, and enslave what survives. Unquote. To that, Ager considers Aliens to be the best feminism film ever made. Yeah, I'm gonna have to hard disagree there, mate. The problem of Cameron's centrist feminism is that it empowers the female warrior to uphold the status quo, dooming women at large, say nothing of everyone Ripley attacks to save the world, by paradoxically blowing it up, or as Metroid put it, pray for a true peace in space. Ripley's a Zionist policing space Hamas, immune to acid but allergic to wandering womb during insect politics. Unquote. She seeks power. Ripley's a Zionist policing space Hamas, immune to acid but allergic to wandering womb during insect politics. She seeks power to rape nature as men historically do, therefore as token Amazons do from Athens to America, slaying dragons while chasing them. Some praxial takeaways. Furthermore, and to preach rebellion for a page or two, assimilation is poor stewardship. The real empowerment fantasy one where workers subvert the state's idea of strength through service, re on the Aegis, nature taking her power back through any and all forms, the booty of the Amazon but also the Gorgon below. Unlike the Amazon, who historically sells out part of the time, Medusa is the weapon that refuses to play ball. The vice character who breaks the fourth wall, ergo capitalist realism, her crushing aura pulls you in and tears you apart. Destroy me goes both ways. Is it in yet? A prophecy to foreshadow a parade of acquired tastes. Whatever the code, it's preferential as a means of stealth and attack, made abstraction, speaking to larger forces through smaller symbols. It's a mood. Make it complex funerary trauma, Pandora's box, the gift that keeps on giving. Ass war is class war of an asymmetrical sort. Medusa, an unruly cemetery cunt, giving and receiving backshots from the shadows. Sex is a weapon, said arms tied to one's animal side, exterminated by state force. Are Medusa's snakes, ergo venom, acid, etc., a kind of ambrosia through combat. The monomyth preys on hell. When the harvest becomes grim, hell's heroine sends the sickle back at the reapers, a useless eater refusing to be the unironic food, by staging enemies' demise through addiction, virgin whore syndrome. Hit it from the back, little man? Try blue balls instead. Hug the alien. Humanize the harvest to expose the state as inhumane, i.e. through any and all dehumanizing language the latter alienates labor and nature with. They take from us what they say we don't have, yet if we didn't have value, there'd be nothing to take. In other words, capital is criminogenic, ergo conducive to harm, including rape. Labor has infinite value, and sex work is work, i.e. the most ancient form of work, distributed dualistically among soldiers, spies, saboteurs, femme fatales, and martyrs, bartering through forbidden forms of trade serving states' rights or worker rights, depending. Liberation and exploitation share the same spaces, on stage and off. In turn, the state classically fetishizes nature to forbid and chase it, a cruel game classically for men that extends to token cops boxing themselves in, R.E. Mark Green's Man Box, a tokenizing proposition among weird nerds. Through the horror's paradox and revenge, the Gorgon in small embodies poison as the cure, the awesome entropic power we both have none of in state eyes, yet wield since birth the very instruments they seek to steal, such as the Black Swan, trapped between life and death, a swan and siren song alike. In keeping with ludo-Gothic BDSM, the Gorgon and her campy holocaust are things to play with, vice embodied through social practice and physicality alike, i.e. the pun-heavy poetics of the neo-medieval revived through vitalistic fleshy means, married to inorganic elements, a golem, e.g. a vice-like pussy whose lips that grip go ham, a biomechanical steel trap, one with bite, its feral tooth and claw approach as prickly as the rosy thorns or vampire's fangs, the live burial of graveyard sex, the strange appetites therein tying to nature as undead, demonic, and or chimeric, a black rabbit to chase by witch-finders, and someone nourished by anguish and revenge, sheathes the sword in the sheath, an inspiration for indigenous, non-white, but also disabled, non-Christian, neurodivergent, mentally ill, and trans, intersex, and non-binary people everywhere, what the Mali call Tonga, meaning treasure in regards to those who are different, which capital can only punish while making others feel alien. As Percy Shelley once wrote in defense of poetry, poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world. Indeed, so we are, acting rebellion out as we legislate far gayer than Mary Shelley's atheist and sexist womanizer husband, the Gothic being a bit randier and pulpy than the high-minded Romantics, especially the first generations, Wordsworth and Coleridge. What matters here is direction, not violence, terror, and monsters to abstain from, but rather send power flowing mid-struggle towards workers and nature. Intersectional solidarity is key, as is creativity to achieve tactical unity as such, the glue holding things together. Diversity is strength, the state a brittle, angry, and sad thing scared of its own shadow, a bit like Peter Pan. Regarding the high-minded Romantics, Scott would revive the muddy relationship between the Gothic and the British Romantics, first with Mary Shelley's novel in Prometheus 2012, then misquoting Percy Shelley by attributing his Ozymandias to Byron, in 2017's Alien Covenant. To that, the cake is a lie. Armandak's utterly splendid when walking away from Omelis, a danger disco in disguise offering up unknown pleasures. The perpetual scapegoat, animal, criminal, terrorist, automatically slated for death, i.e. by state warrants of modular imbricating persecution, e.g. blood libel, sodomy, and witchcraft. We psycho-sluts are political under duress, reviving Medusa's Marxist potential by parting a particular black veil. RE, the anti-Marxist buffer, psychoanalysis classically raised, moving away from Marx in favor of Freud and other dialectics that lost their material standing, e.g. id versus superstructure. We fags have to, or we will not survive, meaning those state orderings of nature pimping us like chattel, hailing from outer space. We build new black churches, castles, what have you, to weaponize such lies on the Aegis, turning any and all power they afford against the elite and their traitors cops among the working class. Barring state shift, there's always another castle. Enter if you dare, flirt with disaster to break the spell of capitalist realism with fresh proletarian magic, worker rights versus states' rights, a struggle that never stops. So make it fun, combining battle with sex in all the usual ways. If we must die, make it a story. E.g. Soviet Russia's legendary Night Witches air unit being run and comprised entirely of women who scared Nazis senseless while dropping bombs, literally death from the skies, on their stupid heads. Every version we make, our enemies will double in bad faith. I.e. the state bridled these Amazons after the war, but their badassery survives regardless. Oscillation is a core facet of Gothic, one whose signature push-pull beckons and forbids to friend and foe alike. In turn, the sex, drugs, and rock and roll on display are fun and informative to a cryptonymic degree. To dance, perchance to scream, we shake our sizable, monstrously pornographic goods, wagging them furiously on any colonizer acting as friend in bad faith, i.e. the white moderate being as harmful to any marginalized group framed as nightly visitor, e.g. the vampire or succubus deemed lady of the night, as much as any xenomorph. The struggle must vocalize, the Gothic go-to being darkness visible, meaning in ways whose fatal nostalgia the state will colonize to men like Ager, preserving the status quo. The struggle is dualistic, pro-state and pro-labor workers sharing the same poetic shadow zone, e.g. Ager versus me, if only because his head's more swollen than Ozymandias, and I'm more than a match for him, a worthy foe to rival him with me and my friends, fire of the gods, i.e. from Blake to us, we're the gods now. In regards to the struggle must vocalize, as Sophie Scholl of the White Rose once wrote, and paid for with her life, if German people are already so corrupted and spiritually crushed that they do not raise a hand, frivolously trusting in a questionable faith in the lawful order of history, if they surrender man's highest principle, that which raises him above all other God's creatures, his free will, if they abandon the determination to take decisive action and turn the wheel of history, and thus subject it to their own rational decision, if they are so devoid of all individuality, have already gone so far along the road to turning into a spiritless and cowardly mass, then they clearly deserve their downfall. Source: 1 Leaflet of the White Rose, 1943. Remember that the state will make workers illegal for profit, i.e. to profit off their deaths by design, i.e. capital decays into fascism by design. Sooner or later there must be struggle, or they would take everything, r.e. Frederick Douglass. Liberation, as Scholl shows by Holly fighting fire with fire, r.e. Nelson Mandela, is commonly fought by children versus adults. Scholl was 21 when the state executed her. Quote, a freedom fighter learns the hard way that it is the oppressor who defines the nature of the struggle, and the oppressed is often left no recourse but to use methods that mirror those of the oppressor. At a certain point one can only fight fire with fire. Unquote. It must be done, Scholl herself calling for active sabotage. Quote, sabotage in armament plants and war industries, sabotage at all gatherings, rallies, and meetings or organizations launched by the National Socialist Party, obstruction of the smooth functioning of the war machine, a machine for a war that goes on solely to shore up and perpetuate the National Socialist Party and its dictatorship, sabotage in all the areas of science and scholarship which further the continuation of the war, whether in universities, technical colleges, laboratories, research institutes, or technical bureaus, sabotage at all cultural events which could potentially enhance the prestige of the fascists among the people, sabotage in all branches of the arts, even the slightest bit connected with National Socialism or rendering it service, sabotage in all publications, all newspapers in the pay of the government that defend its ideology and aid in disseminating the brown lie. unquote. Source 3 leaflet of the White Rose. Gothic sabotage is cryptonymic, yet all war is built on deception, Sun Tzu wrote. To identify with those monsters from Alien, Gorgons and Amazons, is to side with Shelley's Gorgon, i.e., as a natural saboteur the moment it learns to fight. Wake the fuck up. If that means playing cops and robbers to a subversive fuck the alien degree, then so be it. Our home is already a nightmare, and liberation comes from within the cave. You don't kill home rule with kindness, kids. The secrets to universal liberation are in necropolis, meaning as a half-real place of ironic hope among genuine despair, both the ruin of tremendous obscurity and hideous yet divine power to intercept mid-decay, and a treacherous gravesite of self-discovery among the unholy bones, such forbidden and come-hither places, from one faraway castle to the next, invent and invite danger, as oracle at home. A dark commentary on home as fallen empire bounced back, they collectively depict capital's infernal concentric pattern, Ari Aguirre, i.e. to reify and interrogate power as Gothic has done from Walpole to Radcliffe to us, where the brave routinely go to find and hug the Gorgon haunting the crypt. The pedagogy of the oppressed is a revelation then, one in spectral voice, and controlled chaos, uncontrolled opposition, has one been demonized previously by state forces, and two been turned back around by iconoclastic means fertilizing revolt on the corpse of empire, overthrowing what Professor Zhang Zhequin calls the tyranny of the dying, i.e. fascism is when empire is weak, but also desperate and dishonest below. That's what Holly has done, and what Ager's smugly conspiratorial dismissal has completely overlooked. Struggle shifts between order and chaos, the ensuing harmony often discordant, a necrobiome. Gothic poetry is a means of provoking thought, ergo consciousness, among said biome. In conclusion, to that and to conclude, Ager's review is a sad, fatal joke, one stuck in celluloid, in which he comes across as profoundly regressive, ignorant of, and allergic towards those who step outside Freud's shadow, the silver screen, i.e. my work being multimedia on purpose, hostile to Freud, e.g. Ghosts of Freud in Forbidden Planet, i.e. regarding the land-back labor revolt and punching up allegories alien borrowed from Shelley, and Shelley from Milton's seditious and defiant Satan. In Plato's Cave, Ager abjects them in highly snobby ways, i.e. shamelessly nerdy middle-class entitlement pimps Hogel's fakery, goes to the counterfeit, i.e. the Gorgon, while foisting its crimes onto critics of capital. You're doing a power fantasy, not me. Odd to see a psychoanalyst sci-fi nerd who has no idea who Shelley is, or Barbara Creed, a film nerd who wrote her PhD on the monstrous feminine using Freud's essay Medusa's Head. A pimp is a pimp, Medusa the horror such men of reason endlessly fetishize for their own delight, in which Ager grumbles at Holly for daring to liberate. Silence is genocide, and Ager's decree is one of muting Medusa. Again, straight dog water, you can't kill the Gorgon, little man. For her, life and death are part of the same endless equation. One Alien Earth explores by emphasizing the parent-offspring dialogue of the characters. You know, like Mary Shelley did, Girl was a cosmic whore, wrecking homes across the stars. In regards to the dialogue of the characters, read, plural, the show being communal versus singular in its heroism, lending a sensate feel to its Lord of the Flies panoply. So yeah, that's my essay in regards to Rob Ager, someone that I have followed for a long time, at least 15 years, but someone who, as of today, rubbed me the wrong way, insofar as I really wasn't expecting them to say what they said about Alien Earth, and the degree to what they said was so dumb and so reactionary, albeit in a white moderate way, that I felt compelled to write this essay about them, and also to talk about the things that the show explores to a degree that Ager largely overlooked, RE in a way that me, as an expert of such things, including Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, but also future works spiritually succeeding it, such as Alien and Metroid and so on, Alien Earth, I felt like I could talk about it in a way that Ager does not. Ager deliberately chooses not to, just saying, well, this is dumb, I don't like it, I actually prefer Kubrick or Freud or especially James Cameron. Cameron's my favorite. So that really didn't sit well with me because I really don't like James Cameron. I really don't like The Shooter. I really don't like everything that connects to, such as the War on Terror, such as Orientalism, such as, again, a continuation of Heinlein's vein of thought, in a way that's even more warlike and violent as opposed to fearful of the unknown, vis-a-vis Red Scare, Yellow Menace, Black Revenge, than Lovecraft himself in At the Mountains of Madness. It was more and more aggressive with a military character that Ager is supporting by refusing to basically recognize the postcolonial character of Alien Earth, the revolt of the characters punching up against the bourgeoisie, and by extension the characters. The nature of allegory is that you're going to have media that comes from within corporate bodies, but as Andor and Alien Earth show, there still can be allegory on par with A New Hope as directed by George Lucas back in 1977. It was an indie film funded by a studio with a strong anti-war message. The villains in that story were the Americans. The villains in Alien were the company. The villains in Alien Earth were the company, but also people who work with the company who refuse to acknowledge things. And the villain of real life is Rob Ager punching down against the allegory present within the show itself. What he said was in the minority in a way that did not reflect kindly upon him, and that was the point of this essay. If you like essays like this and what they are, what they stand for, which is to say universal liberation through the blend of Gothic communism that I've outlined, you can support my work by liking, sharing, and subscribing, but also, again, finding me on Ko-Fi or through Patreon. You can also leave a comment in the comments section. I'd be happy to respond to it. Sometimes comments like that get made into videos. All that being said, stay tuned as I respond to the finale of Alien Earth. We still have a ways to go because they're only halfway through the series, but when the series is done, I will be reviewing it and posting that on this. At the end of this essay, I will basically be rereading the essay, specifically the section that I add on where I review Alien Earth in full. And yeah, there will be content other than that as well, but that's the content that I'll be making regarding Alien in particular. Stay tuned for that. And until then, stay safe out there and good luck.